Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Beyond Sunday podcast. This podcast's hope is that we can go beyond the Sunday content that we have in preaching. And so with us today on the panel, we have some of our pastors. So I'll let them introduce themselves to you for your listening pleasure.
Hey everyone, I'm Justin. I'm the communications pastor here at Newark.
Hey everybody, I'm Evan. I'm the middle school pastor here.
And I'm Cliff Hines, and I'm the kids pastor here at Newark.
Such a fun room that we have for us today. So just to quickly recap, we've been in a series called Arrows, and y'all, church has been going awesome. We launched 4 services 2 weeks ago, had Lakeside Baptism, fun stuff, and then last week we talked about this idea of the 4 components of an arrow. Evan Ryan, our middle school pastor, brought the word. And Evan, if you had to just summarize what was last week all about in your sermon, what would you say?
Yes, we talked about the arrows as we have been for the past few weeks. We know that arrows are our children, and it is our responsibility to build them. The main idea of the message Sunday was the idea that arrows are built and not born. We talked about each part of the arrow, which is the nock, the fletching, the shaft, and the arrowhead, and how they relate to what we should build into our children and what every good arrow should have, which each of those parts stands for relationships, character, faith, and purpose. So that was kind of what we talked about, but the main idea being arrows are built, not born.
Another good word might be intentionality, right? An arrow does not come off of the tree ready to go. So, well, I think for a little bit of time this morning, let's kind of just go through and walk through some questions that we all had after the sermon Sunday. So I will start with us. Here's question number 1. Evan spoke about how relationships are the anchor for a child's life. What are some ways parents can prioritize and invest quality time in their relationships with their children? And here's part 2 of that question. How can non-parents help foster strong, positive relationships with children in their community?
I think I'm going to jump in. Can I jump in with part 2?
Absolutely.
For much of my life that I realized that I had this goal or this calling of my life, I was not a parent. But I was still in that role of a non-parent, trying to help foster these things inside of a kid. So what I realized is that although that I wasn't a parent, I still had the opportunity to build relationships with many of kids. And part of that was in a church setting. Some of that was on sports teams. And so once I realized that potential, it gave me an opportunity to understand that, hey, just because I'm not a parent of that kid, it doesn't disqualify me to speaking truth into their life. And not just speaking truth, but connecting deeply with them and giving them a resource that they can come to if they didn't feel comfortable talking to their parent.
I think, too, something that is good for us to think about as parents and as people, relationships are important, we know, with our students and with our children, but it's not just the relationship that you as a parent have with them, but it is also the relationships that you are pushing them into, right? Yeah, so I think about, my own children's Sunday school teachers or small group teachers. I think about those things, and those are the people that I want to be present in my kids' lives that hopefully will continue to build that foundation that me and Lena are trying to lay for them. So I just think all of that is so important. Let me ask you guys this. Has there been somebody in your life that is a non-parent that has stepped in and helped build that relationship part of you?
100% yes for me. I know that as I think back to my high school days, when I was at an FCA camp, there was a guy who was one of our leader chaperones. He was not my parent. He was just a leader there. And he was the first person to identify to me, like, hey, you have this leadership ability. Yeah. You're going to be a great leader one day. And I didn't understand the impact of that statement that day. But now that I look back, I'm like, that's one of the guys who first poured into me spiritually.
The Bible says that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And I think if all of us, and even our listeners, you guys can probably remember back when somebody said something to you and it made you feel one of two things. It brought you life, or it absolutely shattered your reality and made you feel like you were dying. But relationships are a key part of that.
Yeah, and let me say, I've had many people like that in my life as well who are not my parents. Michael, you've been one of those people for me. For those who don't know, Michael was one of my youth pastors when I was in the 5th grade, right, Mike?
Yeah, it was awesome. I remember just seeing you with that same swooshy haircut.
Oh yeah,
5th grade Evan.
I used to have it.
What's the show? What's the guy's name on the Grinch? You know what I'm talking about?
Grinch.
What's the show of the kid with the scarf that we said that you look like? Who are we talking
I know
about?
who you're talking about. You're talking about the kid from Horton Hears a Who.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not the Grinch. But
Everybody
Here's a Who. You look like that kid.
Everyone listening now, go look up the kid from Horton Hears a Who.
Yeah.
And that is a spit image of what I used to look like.
And I've got a great picture of him in
link
5th,
dropped in the
6th
show
grade.
notes for that.
We'll try
We
and
can do
work
that.
on that.
We can do that.
Hello, Newark family. This is Tate Wells, worship resident at Newark Fellowship, coming at you from the future in the editing process. Just want to let you know that the kid from Horton Hears a Who that they are referring to right now is JoJo from the 2008 animated film Horton Hears a Who, starring Jim Carrey and Steve Carell. Please search images for JoJo from that film if you would like to see exactly what Baby Evan looked like. Okay, thank you. Back to the podcast.
But Michael was my youth pastor, and he influenced me greatly in my life. And even to the point that I followed him here. And the truth is, I'm not a parent now. Justin, you're not a parent either.
Nope.
But we have that kind of influence on other people. We have that kind of influence on students. And you listeners out there, you have that influence on people too. And we just have to lead them, even though we're not their parents.
Yeah, I think we're going to take a second to move on to this next part of the arrow, talking about building character, the fletching. Knowing that the fletching on the arrow keeps the arrow on track, much like character keeps us grounded and on track in our faith as well. What are some practical ways parents can build godly character in their child's life? Or maybe this, how can we, as ministry leaders, teach that character matters more than talent or success?
It's hard to teach that to kids because they don't see that. When they're younger, they see that talent or that success matters so much more. But I talked about it Sunday. I talked about how many of us have seen in someone's life somebody fail because of a moral failure. We all see it.
My brain just went to like every catastrophe that we see with professional athletes.
Right.
Like
Right.
those guys have more money than they know what to do with. Girls too, right? And it's just there's a character issue, and all of a sudden, their talent doesn't matter anymore. Their success doesn't matter anymore.
They lose everything, right?
Talking about how parents can instill character. I don't know. Maybe you guys grew up in a house like I did. Maybe you didn't. But I remember anytime my dad would ask me to do something that was ridiculous. Like, hey, we live on 4 acres and there's 100-something trees. I need you to go pick up all the sticks in the yard because I'm about to mow. And I'd be like, Dad, I don't want to do this. And every time he'd say the same thing. It's going to build character.
Yeah.
It's going to build character.
So I grew up in a competitive household. We actually had to cancel our family game nights growing up because we would start arguing and fighting over who was winning and not.
Winner's gonna win.
Flip the table like Jesus.
It was crazy. We would get heated in there. But thinking about through building character, that was something that I struggled with growing up because winning was more important to me back then than the character in that. And so it came to this point where you had to come to a realization, or I did growing up, that if I was just trying with what I had to do what I needed to do, and that was all my effort put into it, then winning wasn't as important. The talent, the success is not as important as the character and the striving after part of it.
All right, let's move into the third part of the arrow now, which is the shaft of the arrow. And the shaft represents faith. And I talked about it Sunday. Faith is the foundation that holds everything together. And our faith in Christ is really the only thing that matters. And it holds a child's life together and every arrow. And the question is, how can parents help their children develop a personal faith in Christ rather than just following in their parents' faith, right? That's something we see often is students just kind of following in their parents' faith that their parents have built, but how can parents actually help their students develop that?
You know, Evan, when you first got up there and said this on Sunday, I had one like image in my mind when you said like the shaft is the faith, and that was just like you grabbing all the other elements of an arrow without the rod holding them and just throwing like a ton of stuff across the room, and it's purposeless or doesn't have like any kind of form to it. But I think Michael could probably speak into the importance of getting our students, our kids to serve, because I think serving is just such a big thing that allows ownership of faith.
Serving is definitely a key indicator. There's this research group out there called Barna, and Barna suggests that 80% of students, when they graduate high school, they will leave the church and they will not return until they have a life crisis event, when they're 30s, or when they get married. One of those things, which is just a crazy thing to think about. So serving is definitely one of those things. But also, I really feel like it needs to be more than just, I'm doing this, I'm going to youth group, I'm going to small group, I'm going to church because mom and dad told me to. At some point, there has to be a switch where we as individuals make the choice to grow our faith as our own. We're not waiting on someone else. And the scriptures talk about that. Paul's writing to Timothy, and I think he tells Timothy, train yourself for godliness. So a mentor tells a mentee, this is no longer my responsibility. It is your responsibility to train yourself for godliness. So I think we have to push our students into that. I think that's a very intentional thing. And I think it all comes back to, and we're going to walk right into this, but helping them discover their purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If a student doesn't know their purpose, they're so much more prone to wander. But once I know, okay, this is my purpose, then I'm going to stay exactly where I need to be, and I'm going to do what I need to do.
And Michael, I continue to think about just looking around the room here, just, pastor, all four of us as ministry leaders sitting around this table. And I want to encourage you guys to maybe think about this, like the gospel building faith into a kid shouldn't begin and end with us. Like I believe that should begin and end with a parent, but also like how do we get those parents into that spot where they feel comfortable to help have those faith conversations or to live out what does it look like to be a godly parent in front of their kids. Like I know some of the things that we do in kids ministry, trying to equip parents to have those faith conversations at home with their kids. I think that's a start. That's an igniter, but I think it has to be daily lived out in front of your kids' life that you have made your faith your own as a parent. And then because we've said it before many times that a lot of things that we do in our walk with Christ, it's not taught, it's caught. Mm-hmm. And so if parents are reading their word daily, and showing that in front of their kids, if parents are taking time to pray with and for and over their kids, that's going to be something that's going to be displayed within that kid's life. If parents are getting involved in a church and making church a priority in their own life, finding a place to serve, maybe even getting into a small group. I mean, you're talking about being all in, right? That's what we're talking about. That's what we've been pushing people to do, be all in, because it's not just, it starts with me and end with me. I think it goes beyond how do I train my kid to make my faith my own.
I think also, too, I really wanted to work this in Sunday, but I just wasn't able to because of time. But if you want someone to really own their faith, like that's what we're talking about with kids. We want them to own their faith. They need to be able to defend their faith. They need to have defenses for it. Because the truth is, you will defend something that you take ownership over. I will defend the things that I have. I will defend the people that I love. And if I have ownership over that thing, I'll defend it. And we need to teach our children as well how to defend the faith that they have and the questions and the the trials and the temptations that come with it.
Yeah, and I think one of the easiest ways that a parent or someone who is leading in a student's life or a kid's life is to ask them questions and have them regurgitate information back to you, because that's going to help them process that. And there's this phrase, like, if you can teach it, then you really know it on a deeper level, you know? So like if you have the ability to teach something, then you know that to such a level that you would know it way more than just like reading about it.
And just to let me add this to it too, like you said, talking about asking questions, it's easy for us to ask the yes or no questions. Do you want to go to heaven? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you believe in Jesus? Yes. But I think we need to ask, as parents, as ministry leaders, the why questions, the how questions, all those questions that makes them think beyond just a yes or no answer.
Yeah,
why do you believe in Jesus?
Those are heart knowledge questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Like those. Why do you believe in Jesus? Why do you want to go to heaven?
Yeah.
You know, how did he do that for you? You know, those questions.
Let me just talk to somebody that's listening to this, and maybe you're a parent and you feel that distinct pull, right, to shape and to mold that faith in your students, but maybe you feel like that you're not qualified to do it. Maybe you feel like you're not perfect, and so you can't. And brother and sister, I just want to let you know something. You can do it, and it is not about where you failed or where you haven't done what you're supposed to do, but it's just about being obedient now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what am I supposed to do now, regardless of where I've failed or where I've picked up? So don't let the enemy lie to you and tell you, oh, that's a pastor's job. No.
Yeah.
Friend, you're gonna regret that. Do it. It is in you. And here's the other thing I would say: if there are things that we as a staff can help you with, man, that's why we're here. We want to be your biggest resource. We want to be your biggest cheerleader. We are on your team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the next thing that we're going to move into, and I love the way that Evan presented this, is that he took off the arrowhead in the sermon and like held them separately and talked about the purpose of the arrowhead, that the arrowhead means purpose and that it guides the child's life, and how the parent helps children discover their true purpose, which is to love God, to love others, and to serve the kingdom. So that arrowhead that Evan put on the arrow in the sermon means our purpose, because you know what good is a purpose of an arrowhead if it isn't attached to the staff, if it can't shoot and hit the target? So how can we guide our kids away from the world's distractions and towards a purpose-centered life?
I have this question I like to ask myself anytime I'm thinking about, you know, what I want to do or what I want to push my kids to do. And here's the question: will it matter 100 years from now?
Yeah.
Will it matter? And here's what I mean by that. When you ask that question, I think everybody who's probably listening to this, I could be wrong, but you're probably not going to be alive 100 years from now.
Yeah.
So for that question, for you to be able to answer, yes, it will matter 100 years from now, it has to go beyond you. It has to be something that has kingdom impact. And Evan, I think you nailed this on Sunday, right? There are going to be 3 things that will have a kingdom impact that all of us can do right now.
Yeah.
Loving the Lord, that is kingdom impact. Loving the people around us, that will matter 100 years from now. And then the third one is serving. Like, we are called to serve. The Lord that we worship, who came down from heaven, he said, I did not come to be served, but I came to serve.
Yeah.
And if the Lord of all creation can say, that is my purpose, then we as his disciples, we should be doing the same thing. So the question that I have is, will it matter in 100 years from now? And if the answer is no to whatever it is that you're asking for, I'm not saying it's not good, but it might be a distraction. It could be a distraction from what their purpose and what your purpose really is. And I want to throw this out there because I feel like I see it a lot as a student pastor, not necessarily here, but just over the course of the years of being a student pastor. Sometimes I feel like our students kind of get stuck because their parents push them to do something. And here's where a student gets stuck. Number one, what the parents are actually pushing them to do, whether it be sports or band or a hobby or whatever, they don't want to do it. And then that's on one hand. And then on the other hand, if they say, Mom and Dad, I don't want to do this, they're going to feel like they disappointed their parents.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're stuck in this, what am I supposed to do? I either have to do this thing that I don't want to do, or I know that mom and dad really want me to do this, but if I say I don't want to do it, I'm so afraid of disappointing them. And parents, let me just encourage you with this. Man, ask your students, hey, is your heart in this? I want to be for you, and I want you to go after whatever your heart's in. And I'm not there yet, but I know that it can certainly be a big temptation to live life through your kids as an extension of you, maybe going after the things that you didn't do or didn't have the opportunity to do. But that might not be their purpose.
And let me say this as well. Parents, it's going to be impossible for you to teach your child the true purpose that we all have if you're not living it yourselves.
Yeah.
If you are not loving God, loving others, and serving the kingdom in the way that we're all called to do, then there's no way that that is what your child is going to believe is their purpose too. And I got very convicted of this going through this week. And I started asking myself the question, every time that I leave the house, is that my purpose? Every time I go out, not just when I come to church, not just when I'm on the job, whatever, but every time I go out the door, is that my purpose to love God, love others, and serve the kingdom? And I think we should all ask ourselves that question.
We are not professionals at that.
Right.
At life call or at that calling of our life, right? Like just because we're pastor doesn't mean that we're just all the time loving God, loving people, and serving. No, we struggle just like you guys, and it can be tough.
And I think about guiding kids or guiding students, guiding children. It makes me automatically think of guardrails. Like, what guardrails are we placing around our kids to let them know, like, hey, this is too far? You know, are we teaching them that? What's our source for that? Are we giving them a biblical guardrail, or are we giving them a personal experience of this is what I did, so you shouldn't do that?
Is it a proactive guardrail or a reactive guardrail?
That's true too. Amen.
Yeah.
Right, like the real catastrophes is when a car goes off a cliff and then they say, "Okay, we need a guardrail here." Why wasn't there a guardrail there before? Right?
Yeah, and as leaders, as parents, as people who are building these arrows, who are part of this guiding process, we have to realize that, you know, we're not like friends first. You know, you have to be able to do something that's hard for that arrow to keep it within its purpose. There's direction. You have to be able to guide it the right way. And sometimes that's against what the arrow wants to do. If it's pulling in the wind, you have to pull it a different direction.
And thinking about that, it makes me think about this next thing, man, that like so many times in our life, we, as parents, we make mistakes. We mess up. I mean, not all of us in this room is a parent, but we are an arrow of a parent that is messed up. And sometimes even when we're pulling that arrow back, when it's wanting to stray the wrong way, sometimes we pull too hard. We had too much pressure and too much expectation, and the relationship is not deep enough sometimes, and that arrow breaks. We've talked about this. Michael, you mentioned this in your sermon, and we're talking about it now. Like what encouragement can we offer to parents who feel like they've made mistakes, or maybe for you guys here, do you have a moment in your life where you felt the brokenness of an arrow in your life, and how did you fix it, or how was that relationship mended?
Cliff, you asked the question, what encouragement can we offer to parents who feel like that they have made mistakes? I would just say the very first thing that I would want to remind anybody who's feeling like that I've made a mistake, is that, man, you were so loved. And you're not just loved because you haven't made a mistake, but you're loved in the middle of that mistake, right? The scriptures teach us that while we were still sinners, he died for us. So don't let the enemy take a mistake that you've been forgiven of and let him shame you into submission of doing nothing. Or let him paralyze you with this idea of, I've made this mistake. All of us make mistakes.
Right.
It's just a matter of remembering my mistake doesn't determine who I am. Who I am is determined on what he says.
Yeah.
Who does he say that I am?
Yeah.
And if he says that I'm forgiven and free, I'm going to try to live like it.
Yeah. And parents, if you have made a mistake, you can probably look back on your life too and look at the mistakes that your parents made. The truth is, all of our parents have made mistakes, and we're all broken arrows. But there is redemption for all of us. No matter what it is, there's redemption for it. And we can all probably look back and look at the redemption that we've had in our lives, and the same can happen through the mistakes you have made.
Yeah, and just to point it out there that not every arrow is broken because of a parent's mistake.
Yeah.
That there are other factors in play, and sometimes parents or leaders, we can blame ourselves for a arrow being broken, a kid having this brokenness. We can blame that on ourselves when really it's some other factors that are coming into play in that kid's life, and our best step is to step into that with encouragement, step into that with presence and patience.
Yeah, and that makes me think also about how this message and this series is not just for parents. We want to make that really clear. Every sermon that we preach in this series, that it is not just for parents. And the question I have for you guys is, how can mentors or teachers or church members apply these principles to guide young people in their lives, even if they're not their parent?
If we take these things and actually live them out as mentors, we can affect so many kids' life. If we're building and connecting and having a deep relationship with kids and getting to know them beyond, hey, I know them at church, or I know them at the gym, or I know them from a school. If you're a teacher, if you build deep relationship, you have to know them beyond just the surface level. You build character in that kid because now they have their walls down. Now you can build character and establish a deeper bond with them and letting them see beyond just the mistakes they've probably made in their own life. But hey, because you've made a mistake and now you've grown from that mistake, that builds character in the kid. Not only that, but then if we get them to understand, like, they have a character, like what's the next goal? Like, that's faith. Like, you going deeper beyond just what I can do, but what do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about the world around you? And then if you can do all those things as a leader, as a parent, as a mentor, no matter what role you play, you're establishing purpose in a kid's life. I think these things build on one another, and it's hard to have one without the other.
They definitely do.
Speaking as someone from experience that didn't have someone who was building his arrow in his life, like my father wasn't present, but I had a lot of mentors, a bunch of people who acted in as my spiritual fathers and mentors, guiding me and building me. And they're the people that I can attribute to the place that I'm at today. Obviously, I give it all to God, but God worked through them. And God can work through you as a non-parent, as a mentor, as a leader, as a volunteer in the church. Just looking at the care group leaders in our student ministry and how they are shaping arrows, even to students who aren't their parents.
Yeah. I think here's the real truth, man. No matter who you are, especially if you're out there right now and you're not a parent and you're listening, you have the ability to change somebody's entire world through just being present, through relationships, through instilling character, building faith, and speaking into what their purpose is. And man, don't take that for granted. Yeah. Okay, so that was last week. We talked about the 4 components, parts of an arrow. And this coming week, Cliff Hines, our kids pastor, is going to be bringing the word to us. So Cliff, if you had to just summarize in a nutshell, where are we going Sunday, brother? What are we looking at?
So that last question that we discussed leads perfectly into what we're going to be talking about this Sunday. We're going to be talking about the warrior. We're going to be talking about if we can't get the warrior right, there's no way that we're going to be able to shoot the arrow straight. And so what does it look like to get the warrior right? Well, you got to have a good stance. You got to be ready and prepared to draw your bow. Then not only that, but you got to aim it. You have to have a goal in mind of where you see that arrow going. We're going to be discussing those 3 things.
Speaking of warriors, we have an event coming up. It is our family kickball night, and that is September 27th from 5 to 7. We want you guys to come out here and really just show up. Bring your kids, bring your students, and it's going to be a night of crazy ultimate kickball and s'mores.
And even if you're not a parent and you just want to come, we'd love to have you there.
Yeah, each year we always have people sitting and just watching, like, because it's a fun time to just come out and fellowship with the family.
Some good free entertainment, seeing all those torn hamstrings on the adults that haven't ran in a year.
Not only that, but we also have our Harvest Family Fest coming up on October 27th from 4 to 7. We're going to have trunk or treating and all the other things going on there. A safe place where your family could come out and enjoy some good family and community time together. And that's going to be on October 27th from 4 to 7. You can find any information about that on our Church Center app. So if you haven't downloaded that app, you can download that, take a look at it. You can find it on
Find it anywhere you download an app.
anywhere you download the app, you can find it there.
So download the app and come out to all of our events that we got coming up soon. We have a lot of stuff planned. Also, come out this Sunday and be a part of what we have going on. Come out to support Cliff. Cliff, we're excited for it, and we know it's going to be great, man. But we thank you guys for being a part of this podcast today for the Beyond Sunday podcast. And we hope this discussion has just really helped you deepen your understanding of what God's purpose is for us and for our arrows and for how to shape them. We hope you'll listen again next week. See you guys.
See you later, everybody.
Bye-bye.